The Quran being used today has over 15,000 differences from the Quran that Uthman had distributed. Now, what about the 6 oldest manuscripts of the Quran? Welcome to the TSA Show. My name is Ashley. I'm your host. Now, we delve into just defending the Christian faith and exploring Christianity, answering tough questions and objections. Now, TSA stands for the Social Apologist, just in case you are new. Here's what you can expect out of the episodes. Now, first off, we start off with addressing the question each week. So each week I post a question, and then a week goes by and I actually answer the question myself and then pose a new question. But there's also an opportunity for you to sharpen up your skills. Type in the comment section whatever you feel like the answer is, and then we'll get into it. Then we move on to the show. Now, again, today we're talking about the preservation of the Quran. Now, my master's thesis, my master's degree is in this as well. I'm really pumped and excited about this. And at the close of each show, we go through a couple of questions that people post in the chat. So if you're here, come on the Raven, welcome. It's good to see you here. Post some questions there or email them in, and then we will get to those. I actually have a couple of questions that came in, and I'm really excited to go through them. So let's head into the questions for today. Now, last week's question was, what key Bible verses would you use to demonstrate to a Muslim that Jesus claims to be God? Now, I went through the first couple. Hebrews 1 verse 8. Father, this is God speaking and addressing the Son, Jesus. Father saying to the Son, your throne, O God, is forever. Now, I actually used this in my dialogue with a Muslim, and he said, well, remember, Ashley, the title Lord is used for a whole bunch of people. And I was like, no, it's not Lord, it's God, Theos. God is being used here. So, I mean, it doesn't get more clear than that, the Father calling the Son God. All right, but let's move on. John 8:58. Before Abraham was, I am. Now, why do we think they pick up the stones and want to stone him? Because he was making a claim to be eternal. He was associating himself with Yahweh in Exodus 3. Another one, John 1:1. We all know this one. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's not a God like the Jehovah's Witnesses claim. The Word was God. And then you can continue, and John's great as far as Jesus and God. All right, Matthew 2 verse 8 to 11, as well as 28, 9 and 17. Now here we see Jesus allows people to worship him. He's receiving worship. Yet we see in Acts, they are adamant that the apostles should not receive worship. So you see, Jesus does receive worship, yet the apostles should never receive worship. John 10 verse 30, I and the Father are one. And then it goes on to 31. They pick up stones to stone him. Now, if he was mentioning to be one in purpose, why would they want to stone him? You see, in Jewish tradition, all are to be one in purpose. So clearly, they saw that Jesus was claiming more than just being one in purpose. Therefore, they picked up stones to stone him. Now, put your answers in the chat, what your go-to scriptures are, how you would address this, and then prepare yourself for the new question for this week that we will be going through next week. So here's the question. How would you demonstrate that Jesus was truly a real person and crucified in ancient history? How would you demonstrate that? All right, let's get into the topic of the day. Now, when we speak about the Quran and its perfect preservation, we have to start at the beginning, the origin of the Quran. Now, according to Muslims, the Quran represents God's eternal and precise message. It was revealed to Muhammad spanning 23 years in the 7th century. The Prophet's scribes meticulously transcribed each divine revelation under his guidance. Thus, the Prophet himself arranged and organized the complete revelations into 114 chapters. Now, these chapters are known as surahs, and in an article written by Ismail, the citation of verse 15, verse 9, verse 15, 9 is used to describe the divine nature of the Quran. Here's what it says. It is certainly we who have revealed the reminder, and it is certainly we who will preserve it. Now, according to Afsaruddin, the Arabic word wahi refers to revelation and strictly applies to the Quran alone. Afsaruddin goes on to highlight 3 verses that make this clear. Surah 53, verse 3 to 5. He, Muhammad, does not speak out of his own desire. It, the Quran, is nothing but revelation, which one endowed with strength taught him. Now it carries on here. Here's another one. Surah 69, verse 38 to 48. So I do call to witness what you see and what you see not. That is indeed the word of an honored messenger, i.e. Muhammad. It's not the word of a poet. Little is it that you believe. And then the third surah, Surah 26, verse 192 to 196. Indeed, it is a transmission, tanzil, from the Lord of the beings, which the trustworthy Spirit has brought down upon your heart so that you may be one of the warners in plain Arabic speech, and indeed it is in the scriptures of those who have preceded. Now, according to theologian Abu Mun al-Nasafi, I know these names are really hard, please excuse me. The nature of the revelation of the Quran was brought to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel by memorization, and Muhammad in turn memorized it and recited it to his followers. Now, this is seen in Surah 53, verse 3 to 5, and in Surah 26, verse 192, the word al-Munazal is used, and this indicates a transmission of God's words to Muhammad through Gabriel, who is referred to as a trustworthy spirit. Now, this summarizes the origin of the Quran as presented to Muhammad through the angel Gabriel, whom Allah had sent, according to Muslims. All right? It's good to understand where it came from. Now we're going to move over to, again, according to Muslims and within Islam, the incorruptibility of the Quran. Can it be corrupted or not? So, within Islam, it is believed that the Quran has never been corrupted, nor can it be corrupted. This is very important. This is rooted in the divine revelation of transmission from Allah to Gabriel to Muhammad and recited to his followers. The Quran supports this claim of incorruptibility through the following verses. Surah 15, verse 9, we have without doubt sent down the message, and we will certainly guard it from corruption, in brackets. Surah 85, verse 21 to 22, as well as Surah 56, verse 77 to 78. This is indeed a glorious Quran on the preserved tablet. Surah 4, verse 82, had it, i.e. the Quran, issued from anyone but God, they would surely have found in it many an inner contradiction. Surah 10, verse 15, and when our verses are recited to them as clear evidences, those who do not expect the meeting with us say, bring us a Quran other than this or change it. Say, O Muhammad, it is not for me to change on my own accord. I only follow what is revealed to me. Indeed, I fear if I should disobey my Lord, the punishment of a tremendous day. Surah 18, verse 27, recite what has been revealed to you from the book of your Lord. None can change his words, nor can you find any refuge besides him. Now, when speaking on the incorruptibility of the Quran, if an error were to make its way in, it would be recognized due to the preservation of the text through both recitation and pages in the book. Now, this is according to Draz and Salahi 2017. Draz and Salahi go on to mention how this ensures that Surah 15 verse 9 is ongoing, thus guaranteeing the incorruptibility of the Quran during it. And now this is good. During an interview with Dr. Shabir Ali, who's a prominent apologist for Islam, he mentions around the 15-minute mark of his video that the recent historical analysis of the ancient manuscripts of the Quran that was conducted in Turkey confirms that we have the same Quran today as what they had when these manuscripts were written down. Hear what Shabir Ali says. Here's a quote from him in the video. Quote, so in short, when we compare those ancient manuscripts is what we are reciting now, we see that our recitation goes back to very early times of the Muslim Empire, and those manuscripts themselves date to the time of the companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now, he said this in 2019. We will be exploring if this is true. It's not, but we will be exploring it. All right, I just want to, yeah. All right, let's go through the initial distribution of the Quran by Uthman. Now, Uthman's Quraishi copies of the Quran that he had sent to the other Muslim provinces comes from the Sahih Bukhari Hadith, Volume 6, Book 61, Hadith 510. After Uthman ordered that all other manuscripts be destroyed, a justifiable conclusion can be formed that all copies of the Quran should be the same. The question is, are they? Now check this out. Now I'm going to bring this up on the screen here as well, because it's important for you to see, but for those listening, I will read through them as well. Now, according to Dr. J. Smith and Al-Fadi, Uthman's Qurans do not contain the same amount of surahs within them. All right, now there's 114, remember that. Where today's Quran has 114 surahs, the following is true regarding the distributed copies of Uthman. The Ubai Ibn Ka'b has 116 surahs. Ibn Masud has 110 surahs, and Ibn Musa has 114 surahs. Dr. J. Smith goes on to mention that Zayd ibn Thabit's Quran, which is the one used for the standardized Quran, has over 15,000 differences from the other 3 Qurans listed above. Like we just went through them. Now, this was found by author Jeffrey, and it's important to note that none of these 3 actually exist today. None of them, as it pertains to any surviving manuscripts, but rather commentaries about them. Now, commentaries about them. So, the claim that today's Quran is Zayd ibn Thabit's Quran is not based on any surviving manuscript copies that we have today. Now, remember what we said, Shabir Ali saying that we have, you know, a complete Quran for the 1st century and the Turkish scholars going through. Check this out. Mansur Ahmed, who is a Muslim scholar, has claimed that Islam has a textual tradition dating back to 652 AD, and claimed that this is listed in detail on the Islamic Awareness website, which is islamicawareness.org. Now, upon further inspection, Dr. J. Smith, Fadi and Smith 2022, reveals that this claim of having a Quran that is 96% complete from the 1st century can actually be broken down as follows. Here's actually what they have. 63 fragments are put together to make one Quran. 20 are without conclusive dating. 9 are dated in the 2nd century, and 34 have no research done on them, rendering them speculation. Now, this actually concludes that the claim that both Mansur and Islamic Awareness make about having a Quran that is 96% complete is academically dishonest. But Ashley, what about the 6 earliest manuscripts? Well, Ashley, I'm so glad you asked. I should get a co-host on this show. Seriously. All right, let's go through the 6 earliest Quranic manuscripts and what they actually share. I'm going to share the screen right here. All right, so check this out. The 6 earliest Quranic manuscripts that we can see right now is the TOPKAPI. We have the SAMMARQAND, the Ma'il, the HOUSEINI, PETROPOLITANUS. I'm so sorry about this. The Sana'a. I do not mean any disrespect with these names. I just can't accurately say them. But let's look at what leading scholars say about these 6 manuscripts. So, first, the TOPKAPI Mushaf. Now, according to Dr. Tayyar Altikulak, now just a little bit about Dr. Altikulak. He was one of the first ones who actually got permission to take the oldest manuscripts that we have in Islam and conduct a thorough scholarly work on what they actually say, what the historicity is behind them. Are they actually Uthman's copies? Where do they originate? Like, what's going on? And you can buy his findings. You can go and purchase them if you have like $1,000 somewhere. Like, the single book is so expensive. I wanted to buy it for my degree, my thesis that I'm still working on. It's at least there are resources that I can access by other scholars who've used his scholarly work. It's so expensive. All right, now check this out. Dr. Altikulak says that this manuscript, the TOPKAPI Mushaf, is dated to be early to mid 8th century and is neither the private Mushaf of Caliph Uthman nor one of the Mushafs that Uthman had sent to the various centers. Now, this means that the claim that Uthman had burnt all of them, well, he clearly failed because we have manuscripts that aren't from there. Anyway, Altikulak goes on to mention that within the Mushafs attributed to Caliph Uthman, deviations from the grammatical rules and spelling mistakes are present. The conclusion is that there are 2,270 instances of difference from the consonantal skeleton of the Fad Mushaf. It's a lot. Let's go on to the next one. The Samarkand. According to Dr. Altikulak, this manuscript is not Uthmanic either. All right, so now we have two that survived the burning. As the dating for this manuscript is from mid-8th century, Altikulak goes on to mention that this manuscript contains copyist mistakes, scribal mistakes, and only goes to Surah 43. Of the 43 surahs, only one is complete, 24 are partially complete, and 18 have nothing written. That's significant, like considering the one today has 114. Let's carry on. Now, the Ma'il Quran is in London. This Quran is located in the British Library. And according to Dr. Altikulak, this manuscript only goes up to Surah 43 again and is dated to the early 8th century. Now, let's look at the Paris Petropolitanus. Now, according to Darash 2022, this manuscript reveals corrections to the text. This manuscript also disagrees with the Cairene Mushaf in 93 places. Darash claims there are 5 different copyists and was later modified with erasures and additions. Now, if you ever want to actually buy some scholarly works and the books, they actually have images of these manuscripts having different layers of work being done to them. Erases just written over the previous one. And with the technology we have today, they could actually separate those into 3 different layers, into 2 different layers, depending on how many corrections were made to them and written over them. Some have parchment just stuck over old texts where it's just like it's changed. And we have it, we can see it. It's been analyzed, especially by Dr. Altikulak, and you can buy the scholarly works, Google the images, and you can actually see them with detailed lists of what they actually say. Now, let's move on. So, the Al-HOUSEINI Cairo manuscript. This manuscript is located in Cairo, Egypt. More specifically, Al-Mushad Al-HOUSEINI. According to Dr. Altikulak, this manuscript is not Uthmanic either. Wow. And is dated from the early to mid 8th century. According to Darash, this is dated to the 9th century. All right, so yet another one that survived Uthman's burning to standardize one Quran. Now, let's look at the Sana'a manuscript. According to Olig, this manuscript is the oldest parchment and papers of any Quranic manuscripts. That being said, more than half of the text is ambiguous letters, which are in need of diacritical marks for understanding. Now, it actually goes way more in depth in diacritical marks that actually changes a lot of the meaning for words. Because ancient Arabic didn't have that, you had to essentially let either the context establish what you're actually reading, or with some where the context is not present, just what tradition and people around you have been saying certain words should be and what they should mean. Now, this manuscript also contains different numeration and surah arrangements. This manuscript contains 70 variants within 63 verses. All right. I mean, just on these six oldest manuscripts that we have, when we analyze these 6, a conclusion can be formed that no complete manuscript exists from the 1st century. None. So much for Shabir Ali in his statement very recently. The discrepancies accumulated upon analyzing the findings within this chapter conclude that the preservation of the Quran is, at the very least, compromised. Now, I'm going to share a term that's very important for us to understand whenever we're dealing with Muslims, and also for us to just correctly understand what qira'at is, a reader of the Quran. Because a lot of the times Muslims would say, well, man, why do you Christians have so many versions of the Bible? Why, like, clearly the Bible has changed, right? So if we use that same line of logic, the same line of reasoning that they usually use against Christians, they also have a whole bunch of versions of the Quran, right? And then by their standard, their Quran has failed by its task that Allah would protect the Quran. Because we're going to go through a couple of Qira'at readers and understanding the difference between transmitters and readers, because this blew my mind when I found this out. Check this out. So to define what a Qira'at is to simply say it is a way of reciting the Quran. The two most commonly used Qira'ats are the Hafs and the Warsh. Now, Hafs and Warsh is primarily determined by two major parts of the world. Depending on where you are, you'd probably have a version of the Quran, or if you're like in Northwest Africa, you'd have another version of the Quran. So a lot of the times Muslims would say, well, no, we all recite the same Quran. Well, that's not true. Because, well, what do you mean by that? Which Qira'at, which reader are you actually reciting? You see, when we look at the various Qira'ats, the 7 main readers chosen by Ibn Mujahid are those. You can see them on the screen right now. I'm not going to go through reading each and every one of those, but check this out. That was Ibn Mujahid's Qira'at readers. Then we also have Qira'at readers chosen by Al-Jazari, right? So that's the 3 main readers. But look at this. The transmitters chosen by Ibn Mujahid with their relevant readers. That's a lot. Like Warsh, as you can see, I made it in bold. It's a reader, not even a transmitter. It's a reader of the transmitter. So my question is, well, why did you choose the Warsh? Why not the Al-Bazi or the Al-Duri or Al-Susi or Ibn Dakwan? Like why not the Hisham reader? Like, why don't you have a Hisham Quran? You can buy these. You can buy over 30 of these Qurans right now. You can go online and actually buy them. Now, if you ever go to the speaker's corner with them, Muslims will try and grab them away from you because they know this is a stumbling block for a lot of Muslims, because a lot of imams don't actually talk about this. They don't share necessarily about the Qira'ats because it's a conundrum. It's, how can you claim you have the true Quran if you can't even back up and demonstrate why a specific reader? Like the fact that so many exist and you can buy them, there's even a couple that just predate the ones that they have chosen. And why would you want a reader? Reader is the bottom. So it's the transmitter. Like if we look there at the Warsh one, it's the Nafi al-Madani transmitter, and then there's 2 readers of it. Why not just go with a transmitter? Why go with another interpretation of the transmission, right? So claiming just off of these, I'm not sure how anyone could actually claim that they have the one true Quran just through the Qira'at conundrum. Like, check this out. When looking at this current list of official readers and transmitters, there are 30 different variant Qurans. According to Dr. J. Smith, Fadi and Smith, these transmitters contain 93,263 differences from the readers. Now remember, we had just said there's transmitters and then the readers just below them. Just between those, of all 30 of these, there's 93,000 differences. It's also important to note that the cities that these readers come from, as this means they could not be Quraishi. All right, I get what I said there. I wrote this article a while ago. Now, when focusing on the 2 most popular Qurans, it's the Hafs and the Warsh, right? The interesting fact about these 2 are that they aren't even readers themselves, but rather transmitters of the readers. Oh, I got those 2 confused. My bad. How can anyone say with certainty that we have the same Quran today that was revealed to Muhammad if the most popular Qurans of today aren't even one of the 10 readers, but rather transmitters of the readers? According to Smith, there are 5,000 differences between the Hafs and the Warsh. Now, that brings up the question, right? How do we know we have the same Quran? Depending on where you are, there are 5,000 differences. You might be in Saudi Arabia and you might go like somewhere in Northwest Africa and you'd have two Muslims not having the same Quran. One will have the Warsh, one will have the Hafs. And even in that, there are 5,000 differences. Now, let's break down and formulate a cumulative case against the claim of perfect preservation of the Quran. Here we know what is true. Number one, not a single complete Quran can be found that went to the 5 cities by Uthman from the 7th century. Not a single one. It's not in existence. Muhammad could not have received 7 recitations or dialects if he only lived in Mecca and Medina. There's no canonical Quraishi Qur'an from 652 AD that can be supported by a complete manuscript. Distributed copies of Uthman's Quran differ in surahs. Ubai Ibn Ka'b's Quran, which is the one used for the standardized Quran, has over 15,000 differences from the other 3 Qurans listed here. Now, the 6 earliest manuscripts, as you know their names, are not the mushafs that Uthman had sent to the various centers. Now, as we had also gone through them, multiple variants exist within these manuscripts. They are incomplete, their scribal mistakes and copyist mistakes are present. Now, the current most popular Qurans are the Warsh and the Hafs, which are both transmitters of the readers instead of the readers themselves. The transmitters of the 10 readers contain over 93,263 differences. The location of many of these readers means that they could not be Quraishi. There are 30 official narrations of the Quran, with more than that that are unofficial, that we've not discussed there. We haven't gone through them. We also know between the Warsh and the Hafs, there is over 5,000 differences between those two. Now, Volume 6 of Sahih Bukhari explains how even in the time of Muhammad, his oral dictation of the Quran was presented differently to different groups of people, which caused heated accusatory arguments among fellow Muslims arguing what the true Quran was. Now, this was according to Quraishi in 2018. Now, here's the thing. So, trust me when I say this goes way deeper than a 30-minute talk. This goes way deeper in actually analyzing the claim made between Christians and Muslims. Muslims would say the Bible is unreliable because it has been corrupted, because it has changed. You guys are removing verses out of your Bible. Yet the question's never asked, well, why do you think we are removing some of the verses out of our Bibles? The reason is because we've found older manuscript evidence of the Bible. So we keep them in, but we have a footnote saying, hey, the latest manuscript evidence does not actually contain these verses. Like, we're trying to be intellectually honest and truthful about the manuscript evidence that we have of our Bible. Second, we never claim that the Bible will remain perfectly preserved. Never is that a Christian claim. That is a claim made by Muslims. It's not only a claim made by Muslims, it's a claim made by Allah himself, according to the Quran. Now, that's the thing. For Christians, if the crucifixion never happened, Christianity is false. For Muslims, though, if the Quran has been corrupted and is not the same, and Allah has not protected it, what does that mean for Islam? Now, I know a lot of the times people ask me, well, Ashley, where are your sources? Where are your citations? So I just thought, hey, you know what? Let me just share that here right now. And I mean, you could always pause the video. Here's just a couple that I've gone through right now in this presentation, just in case you wanted that. And yeah, there they are. You can just pause them and go through that. Now, we have finally concluded that section of the show. Now we can move on to some Q&A stuff. Now, I'm going to bring up some questions that I had received here. And the nice thing about this question is it actually came in today. And it was by a person who had claimed that he had actually spent a lot of time with apologists previously. Yes, there it was. A whole line of just causal agents and causality and stuff like that. So, Almost got it. There it is. All right. So in this conversation with a person, he's very respectful. I'm really thankful for that. He actually presented the following question. We were talking about, before we can make any claims or discuss any claims on the resurrected Christ, the resurrection only makes sense in a theistic worldview. Because in an atheistic worldview or a naturalism worldview, materialistic worldview, anything supernatural does not make logical sense. So the first step is actually getting someone to a point where they conclude that it's both logical and reasonable that God can exist. Because if God can exist, then theistic or miraculous things could be possible, right? And then in that worldview and frame of mind, it makes sense that the resurrection could take place. So we were talking about, well, first of all, we have to talk about the causal agent, right? The Kalam cosmological argument. And then what that means when we follow deductive reasoning and attributes that the causal agent has to have, right? We can look at an iPhone and determine what attributes the factory and external influence has to have in order to create the iPhone, right? There has to be a factory, there has to be a mind behind it, there has to be thought, ability to program software, there has to be a conscious mind choosing to cause the iPhone to come into existence. Same thing with a causal agent. It has to be a personal force, because an impersonal force like a rock cannot choose to cause anything, right? And when you have an uncaused first cause, which you do require, otherwise you have an infinite regress, you can deduce by analyzing the effect, which is our universe, on what attributes the causal agent has to have. So we were going through this, and I had said, well, one of the things is a mind. And he had mentioned, well, a mind existing without a physical form is contrary to science. Now, this is very important. Listen to what he said. A mind existing without a physical form is contrary to science. So if your suggestion is that science could be wrong on something and a God mind can exist without a physical body, can I just postulate another possibility? Don't special plead, you break science. Now, here's the thing. Science is limited to the natural universe. This right here was a category fallacy. You see, you cannot apply science as the standard for something that is metaphysical, for something that is outside the realm of science, something that is outside the natural laws, right? Because that doesn't work. It's like I expect science to demonstrate to me that the scientific method is viable. See, it presupposes a couple of things. You can't use science to prove the scientific method. But again, it's not supposed to be able to prove the scientific method because that is a category fallacy. Same way that you can't expect science to prove something that is beyond science. You cannot expect science to prove something that is outside the confines and the restraints and limitations of science itself. Anyway, not as much of a question, but more of a, I don't know, a statement question. All right, question. Here, come on the Raven, you posted a question. Let me go through this real quick. What would you recommend as resources for Christians about Muhammad, Islam, and the Quran? Now, there's two stuff. There's two stuff I would recommend. Now, if you listen to podcasts, if you like podcasts, I would highly recommend you go to Biola University. There's actually a podcast there on Islam, apologetics to Islam. And Nabil Qureshi, who wrote the book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, he gives the lessons, the talks. All of them are excellent classes, and it's completely free. You don't have to pay for anything. And you get a person who was a Muslim, who became a Christian, who then became a Christian apologist, speaking at a university. He passed away, unfortunately, very young age, but man, the stuff that he left us with was really good. So there's a free resource, and then if you want to go further than that, I would actually recommend buying his book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, because it explains his whole journey through his conversations with David Wood. They were friends, and they had gone back and forth on, debating Islam, debating Christianity, and back and forth, because Nabil actually used to have fun. He always took up the challenge to debate with Christians while he was still a Muslim. So that's definitely what I would recommend. And then there are obviously more academic sources. So depending on how deep you want to go, there's actually a whole bunch. I actually have one here. It's called the Sana'a Palimpsest, the transmission of the Quran in the 1st century, and it actually goes through just the layers upon layers of corrections. Right now, it also goes through a lot of Arabic, but here you could actually. So can you see? Where's my focus? Like it actually shows you where some of the stuff were stuck over, which one was a top or a bottom layer, which is pretty neat. Now, if you ever want to go through that, it explains it really well. But as I said, like this is essentially someone's PhD dissertation that they put in a book. So definitely not an easy read, but it's a big one. So